Okay, this thing gives you like a countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and sometimes it don't, or it's hidden behind the damn video screen. Anyhow, Karen White Mama sitting over here, and we are talking about maps in our hobby in general. Uh, Maps are a great tool, a great thing to have as a visual tool to help set the place and and sometimes give you the idea of what and where and how and so on and so forth. And I've always believed in maps as being a useful tool for anybody's table. You can see, we're looking at basically a map for Waterdeep, for Dungeons and Dragons, for example. But you name the genre, you name the game system, and most of them will have maps. Now, there are many that do not include maps, and it's a given that they figure that's on you. That's up to you. But most of them do. And we're typically familiar with things like this sort of stuff where we have layouts for buildings. And how many of these have you made yourself? You know, you're going to make maps, visual aids, and sometimes we make them on a scale big enough that we can use our miniatures on them and so on and so forth. So you're familiar with that sort of stuff, right? I'm sure you are. So here's part of a city, and then the surrounding immediately outside, and then as an addition to that is we have parts of a castle, the interior of the castle walls, and things like this. And of course, here's an example of a template for my would-be game. Planetary master sheet. Once again, a map in order to draw the planet surface, so we can place things like factories and large communities and important tourist traps, things like that, things we want to keep track of. We can put them on the map itself, and then we can list them down here. And we know that we could just have a list. We don't need the map at all. We could just say, this is the place, this is what's there. But sometimes they go back to the analogy that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and there's a lot of truth to that. So you can do with a map, or a picture, something that would take a bloody notepad full of notes to cover, and be easier to just place them and for at a glance kind of thing. And like I said, it comes with the blanks and the basics that come from in all sizes. This is obviously a map that I would have been using back in the day for tabletop war games, warfare, and for miniatures. And it came both with the square and rectangular and the square and the hex. And I've always been a big fan of the hex. And ironically enough, I'm looking at this map now. This is what is this? This is a map of for space opera. This would have been a map I used way back in the 70s and early 80s when we were playing a space opera. It was before I got my hands on Star Wars from West End Games, of course, which then we, of course, switched over to that. But as you see, as right now, I'm currently having problems just folding the map up in this tight space that I have. Because aside from the fact I got Mama sitting over here, but I also have, a limited amount of space. So therein lies part of our problem with maps in the modern age, or any age. We can put them on laptops and on iPads and things like that without a doubt, and that makes them more useful. And if you're wealthy enough and you can afford a game, one of these fancy game tables where you can have the screen and the map just projects out on there, it's an extra an extra bit of fluff for people to look at. But are they really necessary? It depends. Even the crudest maps, all right, are valuable beyond mere words. It's hard for me to sit there and give you all the positive reasons for having them and all the negatives. So I'm not trying to go that route. As map maker, here in part of my philosophy on how maps ought to be created in the game world setting. The game master, regardless what the hell title you prefer to call them, should have as detailed a map as they feel they need to have for reference material. It's just easier for them to keep track of where the party is in relation to other stuff. And this comes in several forms. One way of mapping stuff is by keeping a log. Now, a lot of people will sit there, well, that's the difference. That's the same. That's not the same thing. And you're correct. That is a different media. It is a different concept, but it's still a map. If you create it in such a manner you can follow it. players at the table ought to be able to create maps themselves from if they're happen to recreate them from memory or they're happen to scribble them as they go, so be it. But technology and genre alters this considerably. This is a considerable change. So if you're playing the aforementioned space opera or Traveler, which actually space opera predates Traveler or comes out exactly about the same damn year. Anyway, or you're playing Star Wars and its infinite number of versions that are available today, or Shadowrun, or BattleTech, or 40K, or 100 other damn game systems out there that are digitally, technologically advanced compared to a medieval setting, then by rights, any map available to the table should be available to the table, as long as the players can justify how they access it. So if I'm in my starship, I should be able to pull up all the maps I have of the cartography maps and the star maps and planetary maps and things like this that are available in the database. Now, if you go someplace and you're exploring, you're purposely leaving the database behind and entering areas that have not been charted, have not been mapped. At that point, you're back to creating a brand new map so you don't get lost the hard way, even if you're using computers to do it for you in game. But you should not have to sit there on a piece of paper at the table and try to map out the map if you're in a more technologically advanced setting, because if you're in Shadowrun, you just dial it up. BattleTech, you pull it up on your computer. It's already provided for you. A technical locations, everything you need is just imbued into these things. So we tend to realize we don't need the maps as much when we play future setting environments and modern setting environments. So they're not necessary. It's not something you must have in your game. They're a great visual aid. They're great visual fluff. They're a useful tool both for the game master and the players. And the question being is who should provide them, how much should be available to the player, etc. So once again, if you're in a situation where the player can just Google a map of a region and get their version of Google Earth, then you best be able to provide them with a full-on map of whatever you can provide them. Or it's just a given that they're not going to get lost as long as they have access to their tech. The minute they don't have access to their tech or the tech goes out of commission, that ought to change things. How much do look at your modern cell phone today? I challenge you. If you're in my age bracket, then you damn well know what I'm talking about. We grew up needing to memorize crucial phone numbers. We knew our home phone number, our parents' phone number. If it was different, we knew that. If we knew our best friend's phone number by heart, we knew our cousins who we talked to on a regular basis by heart. Some people would then resort to, who had many more contacts. This is when the little address books come into play, where we have these little phone books that keep track of all the who's who in our world. It wasn't until the invention and the application of the modern cell phones that this radically changed. For you younger folks, you don't understand. You kind of laugh sometimes at why the older people struggle with certain things. What you don't get is we were trained in a different way to do things a little different. And so as things become irrelevant, memorizing all your emergency numbers is still a laudable thing. You should still know your home number. And I still struggle with this. This is ironic. I have the same cell phone, the same phone number for my cell phone that I've had probably for 8 years now, 7, 8 years. I'm on my, I don't know, 7th or 8th phone, and the one I got is currently it's got a cracked screen and it's showing some issues. So I think it's overdue to be replaced with something a little better. I haven't got to that point yet because it's hard to figure out how the hell I gotta wait till I get a month where I'm just swimming in overtime to go buy it, because I gotta buy it, but I also have to buy the damn the monthly service card that goes with it at the same time. So I'm gonna drop a couple $100, not $50. It's just like, well, 100 and something anyway. It's gonna be $40 for the phone card, whatever the phone's gonna cost, because I don't want one of these expensive $200 a month phone bills. I just can't pay it. So I have to go with the cheapo burner phones like that that are cheap for a reason, right? So everything I have is in there in that in the phone address book. And I can just look up somebody and touch the button just like everybody else, and then the phone call's made. I can look them up and physically get the phone number, off that entry. But who does that? You just look them up and hit the button. So we don't memorize stuff as much as we used to. We don't have the need to. And there's a whole slew of y'all out there who don't memorize anything when it comes to stuff like this. You're shortchanging yourself, and if things really go south, or you find yourself in a bind. And if you don't believe me, you can only imagine how many millions of people down in Florida are in this problem right now, trying to understand. They can't. How do I call home, or how do I call my cousins if I don't know their damn number and I don't have access to my cell phone's dead? It got it was ruined by the rain or the flooding, or it's the battery's dead and I haven't had a chance to charge it yet. How do I do that? Right? It becomes an issue. It's just like uh, certain things. It just boggled my brain. I don't know about you, but how many times I have in the last month, at least twice, I've been at some place and the cashier absolutely could not count the change. They were literally struggling. We pay cash for as much as we can, and the wife is a big believer in giving you exact change. She goes out of her way to make sure she has exact change for everything as often as she can. And yet, sometimes you don't have this choice. You have to give them a couple. Instead of giving them $22 and some change, you give them $40 and some change, and you're expecting $18 back. And the person behind the cash register is struggling because they don't get it that they got to count it back, or their machine didn't tell them, and they don't know how to read it, and they're struggling. It's the same ones who I don't know. Anyway, I don't get it. I don't understand how you could not understand this stuff to some degree. Anyway, maps in general are useful tools. They're not necessary. They are important to a limit. That I'm from an era where we used them a lot. I still use them a lot. I think most people do. Whether your game system, what your goals at your table makes the difference. If you're pushing total immersion, if you're looking at getting as close to full immersion or fourth dimension of role play as possible, then you don't need maps. You don't want maps. You really only need maps as a reminder for yourself. So perhaps you will have a personal map that you've made on your notes that you can then reference while you're talking, your character's talking and acting on the screen, as opposed to fiddling with a bunch of stuff on the tape. The necessary need for one from a GM's perspective, as I've gotten older, I feel mixed opinions on it. I don't believe that they're necessary. I don't think that you need to crank them out. I do believe that good players should make their own maps, and the GM should have their own map that's accurate. Whether or not the player's map is as accurate as the GM's is part of the fun. People make a map and it's crude. It's just like, we're going to get a map of the area. Are you now? I don't know about you, but Rand McNally didn't exist in the second millennia of humanity. I'm just saying, if you went to Waterdeep in Forgotten Realms, there's a really good chance you can find a cartographer who will sell you a map of Waterdeep, of the surrounding region, and it might be fairly accurate too. But you're going to be in a massive city in that setting. If you go out into, bum F nowhere, Thorpe, where a couple hundred people live in, you're not going to find a cartographer there. You'd be lucky if you find a blacksmith there, let alone anything else. But a cartographer is not going to happen. And most of those peasants and them shopkeepers, they either don't have time or skills or inclination to make any. So it's a rare thing. And a lot of map making would have been considered artwork back in those days. If you look at some of the maps from a couple, 300-400 years ago, they're elaborate. A lot of them are very elaborate. And some of them are obscurely elaborate. So there's downsides and dangers to that. That is something that I have used as a GM in the past with mixed results. When I was younger, I thought it would be amusing to give the players a terribly inaccurate map. So here's the map that shows all kinds of things that may or may not actually be there and exist. And the downside was I actually would get frustrated after a while because then the players would see this thing, go, oh, we want to go look at this. Let's run off over here. And they go off, based on something that doesn't exist on the map, looking for something. Then I have to either fill in the blank and provide them with what they're looking for, or somehow explain to them in game that what they're looking for is a falsehood, that the map's not accurate, or what they get there looking for the giant 500-foot statue of an orc and find out it don't exist, or it's just some weird rock formation that kind of vaguely looks like something, right? So how do you play that out? Anyway, maps are a great tool, useful tool, but not necessarily an important tool, in my opinion. Anyhow, till next time, I'm Rick. This is Mama, who's sleeping on my hand now. I hope you guys have yourself a great weekend. It is, as of this, was the 12th? I think this is 10/12, so October 12th. The month is not quite half over, but we're getting there. It's actually not a bad day out there. It's supposed to be in the 70s today here. We're going to get too many more nicer days like this. It's going to start turn cold soon. It's supposed to be dropping into the 60s next week, so we'll see. I need to get out and get the rider out and go mulch the leaves in the backyard, and then put the rider away for the winter. I got to get some fuel additive to add to the fuel, and I couldn't get the other rider to start. I went out and it started in the spring, and I was able to move it up closer to the house. And then I went out and tried to start it a couple weeks ago, and it's 40 odd years old, and it's probably seen the last of its days. It's so hard to get started in a good day, and I've been debating whether to sell it or not. It was my dad's for many, many decades, and uh, I'll never get. I don't think I could get the value of the tires I put on it. So I replaced all them tires the last 2 years on the damn thing. So I don't think I'd even get the value of the tires out of it right now if I sold it. And of course, it's just going to be a piece of memorabilia, I guess, sitting in the backyard forever. At least until I'm gone and somebody else throws it away. Isn't that the way the world goes? Everything we think is important isn't really, it's only important to us at the moment. Isn't that right, Mom? All right. Yes, I know. I know. All right, Mom.